So I'm going to start by telling you a little vignette that happened in my life recently, because it's relevant. And then we'll get to the lecture. You've got the lecture notes about my relation to others. I think others is the title on the syllabus. All right, so we're starting to move away from a purely individual point of view here and move towards consideration of society, so self and society, that kind of business. All right, but here first is the story that starts, well, it's not even a story, it's just what happened. So for the last 2 years, my wife and I have cat sat. That is, our daughter lives in Washington, and she moved in an apartment where they wouldn't allow pets. And she says, they won't allow pets. I remember the conversation, and Susan says to me, what are we going to do? And I said, any friend of Rebecca's is a friend of mine. You know, like, we'll take Minnie in. Minnie is her name. Kind of a semi-feral cat. So, like, you can't pick her up or anything. But other than that, she's great. So we had Minnie for 2 years. And what that meant was she was confined to a certain area of the house, so she wouldn't, for instance, eat the guinea pigs, but or tear up the sofas, and if you had cats, you understand. So we had her in a certain area of the house, and so every morning I'd get up and I'd walk out of our bedroom and I'd walk out, and there she'd be sitting there waiting for me. That's how she meowed. I go, morning. And then I'd go in my study to work, for an hour or so before breakfast, and she'd follow me in. And she'd sit there. I'd pet her for a minute, and then she'd lie down and just sit there and purr right next to me, for the whole time I went, great, okay, nice cat. Well, one of the results of all this, and then there are all these other sort of habits you develop in living with this animal. So I would walk out from our living room into the front hall, and the door was closed, again, so she couldn't get to the guinea pig. And you'd walk out, and you have to kind of hesitate, so you don't bonk the cat with the door, because she'd be sitting right behind the door waiting, like, and then walk up the steps. And then you got to be kind of careful walking up the steps, because otherwise she gets under your feet. Okay, fine. And that's great. So what happened is my stepdaughter moved into a new apartment, and they take pets. So she got Minnie. So a few days ago, our son takes the cat and takes her off to Washington. There's no more Minnie. Now my wife, who professes to hate cats, was kind of upset. It's like, oh, I kind of miss her. And I get up in the morning and I walk out of the door. You open the door to the bedroom, and there's nobody there. And I walk in my study and I sit down and I kind of look over. There's nobody there. And I found myself last night coming from the living room, and as I opened the living room door into the front hallway, I kind of hesitated. Kind of hesitated. Now, why is that all relevant? Well, I understand that Minnie, I know she's no longer there, right? But what does that mean to say I know she's no longer there? That means if you ask me, I'll tell you she's not there, right? And I can express that. And yet I'm sort of some ways acting like she's still there. So I don't fully know that she's not. Understand? And a lot of our knowledge is that sort. It's physically embedded at a certain point. That is, and you know this, if you, I don't know, you ever break up with somebody you spend a lot of time with, you find yourself, you're walking through the grocery store and you look at the Lucky Charms, you go, she really likes Lucky Charms. You're right. Or you kind of automatically reach for them or something like that. Just on the assumption it's built into our way of being in the world. That's the point. So again, we want to try to get away from this notion that knowledge is predicative, as philosophers would say, or thematic, where you're actually consciously thinking about it. It's not all mental. It's embodied in us, right? Easiest example is something like riding a bicycle. There are sort of steps to learning to ride a bike, but once you learn how to do it, you can forget those steps. There aren't rules that you follow to do it. Or speaking French, if you're fluent, right? A foreign language. Once you learn it, it's just there. You don't remember all those rules. You don't have to. That's not what makes the language real. What makes it real is you're living it. Okay. Final example on the cat. My wife walked into the study yesterday, and she was laughing about it. She walks in the study, and she looks over, and she saw Minnie. And then she realized she didn't. What she saw was my slipper on the floor, right? But it was right where the cat had always been, and she sort of projected a vision. Now, psychologists have studied this sort of thing. You do that, right? You see, in a lot of ways, what you expect to see. And that can go a pretty long way, where you continue to see something that, in a sense, is not there anymore. So, how all that's relevant here is that our connections to the world are not a matter of one object and another object, or even of a subject, right, like a free mind, and an object. They're much more intimate connections than that. I don't even see things unless I'm prepared, so to speak, to reach out and grasp the world in that way. For instance, as I said to you the first day of class, a joke can't be funny unless I've got a sense of humor. In other words, unless I'm prepared to reach out and grasp that joke in that way that means funny to me, right? Or to see another person as nice or attractive or any of those other examples we've talked about, right? There's some sort of interaction between me and what's going on out there that makes funny or nice or seeing the cat or whatever, right? So what we're going to see with Merleau-Ponty's philosophy is he keeps pushing us to recognize that our original experience of the world, I should say, is not one of I'm here and you're there and then we connect. It's that we're connected at the outset with other people and with objects and so on. We're connected at the outset. Then we step back and make up some theories about how you're over there and I'm over here. Okay? And that really is kind of the theme of the lecture today, actually. Okay? So, the socialness of the self. Let me say one or two things about the self and then go into this whole idea of how, just a few of the ways in which we're connected to others. All right? First, the self, we've already said that there's more to me than what's standing right here. Okay? I transcend myself in all directions, you might say, if you want to sound like a philosopher. Okay? I go beyond the here and now of what I'm doing. Now, I know there was this thing about Sartre says you are only what you do and so on, but then it turns out when you read him, he has a very expansive notion of who you are, who I am, right? So he says, I am what I am not, I am not what I am, and I am not, all that business, right? But that some important part of me is the stuff that's either potential or that is not here in the literal sense of right here and now. My examples are that think about me as an example. There's a big chunk of me that, in a sense, lives in Tennessee. And it lives there in the sense that I've got friends and family members and so on who carry on their lives in an awareness of my existence. And that my existence has some impact on them all the time. Okay? And that there's, so that's them, but it works in both directions, is kind of the funny part. There are also parts of me that are Florida. That is, I do stuff, well, all right. You reach a certain age, your skin starts going to hell. And part of my skin's going to hell in part because I spent my entire college career sitting out in the sun in Sarasota, Florida, reading philosophy books and frying my skin. Well, it comes back to you at a certain point, right? There it is. It's a little bit of Florida right here. know, and you can carry that with you, and that there are also people there. And I sometimes consciously act in an awareness of certain people in Florida, and being aware of how they would respond to what I do. I kind of spread out, you know, the world spreads out around me, is what we said on the first day. It also spreads out in time, obviously, and we've talked about this before, but I want to mention one in particular is, you know, this notion of my future reaching out towards something, that you live as if you've got a certain kind of future going on, and that affects the way other people treat you, right? That if you're living with a sense, simple example would be, if you're living with a sense that you're going places and going to be doing big things, other people treat you differently. We call it confidence, maybe. Right? Or if you act like, oh, let's all go do this, and then people go, oh, okay, you know, you're acting, you're moving as if that's definitely going to happen in the future, and that draws other people to you. We've talked about this in my intro class with regard to dictators and leaders and all sorts of things, that if you project a future that's clear and you seem to be committed to it, it changes, it draws other people into that project in some ways. Okay, so I go beyond just the here and now, but it's carried with me right here in the present in lots of ways. Chattanooga, Tennessee is here with me now, in the sense that a good linguist who doesn't know me could listen to me talk and tell you where I'm from, could say that I'm from East Tennessee, even though my accent is not nearly as strong as it used to be. But, you know, they can hear, and they can say, well, you've probably been away from there, you know, 20, 25, 30 years. I'd say you're East Tennessee, Western North Carolina. There it is, right? It's in my mouth. I mean, Chattanooga's in my mouth in a way that I can't even get rid of, even if I wanted to. It's also carried with you in the sense of, we have this, Merleau-Ponty mentions this in the reading, actually. And Sartre talks about this, I think you read this passage, about when you look at a person's face, or Oliver Sacks talks about it. Right? When you look at a person's face, you don't just see what's physically there. Now, Sacks points out, hey, wait a minute, you don't even see a face unless you do something. Right? The people who have neurologic deficits just see lines and circles and things like that. So you reach out and kind of grasp a face, like, wow, that's a human being. And that's a significant sector of the visible world. It's kind of different from everything else. But you also see what's, so to speak, what's behind the face. You imagine's maybe the wrong word, but you imagine the person who's living it, right? You imagine, you might say, a personality behind that face. And you don't have any choice but to do that. You have to pick, you have to imagine something. You project a personality onto that face. That seems to be the way we operate. Okay, one other comment about this future, about the future being here and now. The existentialist philosophers, Sartre and Merleau-Ponty especially, developed this notion of an existential project. I can't remember if we've talked about this before. But an existential project is, the idea is that everybody has goals. That's the way we typically think of this. But we usually think of goals as being things that you could write down on a sheet of paper and say, I'm trying to, I would like to win the class election for senior class president. I would like, my goal is to have a career in marketing. Is I'm going to get a master's degree in education and then be a high school teacher. And we think of our goals as kind of definitive, explicit, stateable things like that. And what Sartre said was, it's much bigger than that. You don't even have to have goals in that sense. You, in fact, are living them. That is, you're living in a certain direction. And it might be, if you study a person closely, you can figure out, this is great stuff, you can figure out that some people, for instance, their life project is to please their father. This is not rare, by the way. And you know the interesting part, they'll keep doing it long after he's dead. They continue to do stuff, and you go, why on earth would anybody do that instead of, you know, and they're trying maybe to prove something to their dad or win his approval or something like this. I just picked that as an example, but it's a workable one. Or they're trying to make, you know, this you see on TV movies, this kind of thing. You know, they're trying to overcome their guilt about something they did when they were young. And they keep trying to do that over and over again. And it infects all of their decisions in their life from then on. And that, you know, if you get down to what's the common thread or what's the guiding force in somebody's life, sometimes you can pull that sort of thing out and say, oh, that person's real goal is this or this or this. And a really good psychoanalysis could supposedly do such a thing. Figure out what's really driving you. And Sartre called that your existential project. That is, what's the project that's really guiding your life? Good thing to think about sometime. Right, try to figure out. Don't get too scared. But right, your existential project.
Are you allowed to have more than one?
I'm sorry?
Are you allowed to have more than one?
Allowed to. It's an empirical question. See, find out. I don't know. I guess. Although my sense is that they would be sort of skeptical of that. They would sort of think, well, it's not. You know, maybe you like being conflicted. Right? Maybe there's something about, oh, if I'm torn, that suggests that I'm really a serious person. For instance. Okay. All right. But that's not the main theme of today's discussion. The main theme of today is introducing us to this notion. So anyway, the self, I've got the self, kind of spreads out around me in different directions. All of that helps to see how we're connected to the world and other people. All right. So what I'm going to argue today is that you're connected to other people in all kind of ways that are deep and profound and right from the outset and everything else. But let's go through a bunch of examples to get the hang of it. Number one, I am my others will be the topic. I am my others in a bunch of different senses. Number one, obviously, you physically were produced by your parents. You are your parents in some pretty important ways. And I think I mentioned before, you know, if you study it, you can see that genetically all sorts of things about you come straight from your parents. Obviously, most of you look like them, which comes shockingly obvious at graduation. It's hilarious. You'll see this. So you look around and you see your friends and all, and you see them as distinct people. What will happen at graduation is everybody after commencement will sit in a tent or in the hockey rink or something, around big round tables that will accommodate 8 or so people. And you'll sit there with your parents and relatives and your brothers and sisters and so on. And people will walk by and start laughing. It's like, oh my God, there are 4 of them! You know? Because it turns out you are just the specific outcropping of this mass of genetic material coming down the pike. And, you know, you've got these relatives and stuff who look just like you. It's great. It's hilarious. I mean, it's hilarious because we're used to seeing each other as individuals. Because you're not with your family all the time. We're not interacting as families and so on. So you're others, you are your others in that sense. And that has all sorts of effect on your health. I mean, doctors are into this kind of stuff because the first thing they want to know is, you know, anybody in your family have heart disease? Anybody in your family have cancer? Right? You know, what does that have to do with anything? Well, it turns out it's probably the biggest chunk of what has to do with everything. Okay, so you are others in that sense. Number 2, you're socialized to be like others. Socialized, I don't mean like having parties with people. Socialized meaning socially brought up and trained. So Peter Berger, whose book we're going to read later in the semester, Social Construction of Reality, Peter Berger says society is in us. You become the society that you live in. Now the detailed versions of that at the individual level are, the example I always like is you have your own gestural history. That is, you could do what phenomenologists call an archaeology of your own mannerisms and try to figure out where they come from. It's really interesting. So some years back, my mom used to sleep on the sofa to take naps. Both my parents took a lot of naps. I take a lot of naps. Somebody came to my door today at 1 o'clock. I was napping. Anyway, my mom used to sleep on a sofa with her head kind of tilted like this, resting on her hands. Sort of an odd position. I mean, she'd have a pillow behind her head. Some years back, there I am taking a nap. One day I wake up, I'm like this. I'm like, oh shit. I'm turning into my mother. It's great, right? And then I watch these videotapes and I'll see things like, okay, let me see if I can get this. There's an expression, it's like, so it's not just a shrug, okay? It's not just like this. The mouth turns down more than that. Like this. Okay, that comes directly from a woman named Penny Rosal, who was my undergraduate advisor when I was in college. And I spent, advisor doesn't begin to touch the relationship. I mean, I used to eat dinner with her once a week, you understand? I mean, it was a very close relationship and friendship and all that. And I took everything, every course she ever did. But she had this kind of expression. She'd be talking along and would bring up, I'm trying to remember exactly what the context. Have I ever done this in here?
Yeah.
Yeah, once. Just like this. That's Penny Rosal. I mean, and I was unconscious of it until I started taping these lectures. And I was watching, holy mackerel, there's somebody I know. Me, but I was doing somebody else, right? My brother Alex does let's see if he does something like Danny, that's not going to work. He does this thing where he lifts his eyes off and goes off to one side with it when he's expressing skepticism, right? And I see myself doing that. There was another I did, my brother Tom, that I saw on this, but I can't remember what it was. I found myself, I think I told you I was riding in the car once and I found myself doing the shoulder business, and my brother smacked me, you know, he's like, hits my leg. What, Dad? Turned into my father, right, doing these, you know, things, and he pulls on his pants, like this kind of stuff. Totally unconscious, and I'm certainly not trying to imitate it, you know, I don't want these things necessarily. There's a certain way of rolling your eyes that a girlfriend of mine years ago used to do that I picked up. Well, anyway, the point is you can go through your own mannerisms of all sorts. Oh, there's a, let's see, how's he do it? Okay, there's a scene in, okay, help me here. What's it called? Play It Again, Sam, which is a Woody Allen movie. Came out many, many years ago. It's good. It's a very good movie. There's a scene where he's getting ready for a big date, and he was, you know, he's a schlemiel, right? I mean, he's a little guy with glasses and skinny and kind of ugly and stuff. And he comes out of the shower. He's getting ready for a big date, and he's got a towel. You know, all he's wearing is a towel. Now he's not like a hot body, you understand? And he's out, and he kind of walks across the floor like this with his head kind of, you know, he's got this crummy posture, and he kind of does this thing. Every so often I catch myself actually doing that. Actually doing it. You know, I got a towel, I walk out in our bedroom like this, like, oh shoot, you know. And I have no notion of why that visual image of a person walking that way stuck, but it really did. You know, it's a great game to play, actually. You ever try to imitate people's walks? Do you do this in dance class or anything? People do that sort of thing? It's fun. Think about different people you know and then try to move the way they move. Well, the point is, every so often you pick one of those up for whatever reason. Either you find it attractive in some sense, or it captures some attitude that you want to replicate at a certain moment, and you do it. Well, there you are, right? And again, the graduation thing works, right? You watch people with their own family. It's not only that they physically, you know, like as a physical object that you look like your others, you have their gestures too, and mannerisms and all. Hilarious. Anyway, okay. And then at a broader cultural level, that goes to things like American and Japanese babies are different. Right? Within weeks of birth, you start picking up the mannerisms and the ways of being an American or a Japanese or an Ecuadorian or whatever. Right? You pick up all these, and it becomes physically embodied in who you are. Now, at a more cognitive sort of level, people and societies have shared histories that are quite important. So I have on my sheet here, I said 9/11, because a couple of years ago when I wrote this, 9/11 was a big event for college students, for my then college students, you know, when they were 10 years old or something. For you, it's probably before you're aware. I mean, how old were you guys? 13?
Third grade.
Oh, third grade. I'm sorry. Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. So that's a big deal. It's a big deal. Right. Okay. All right. Well, that's part of a shared history, right? And it's a big thing for you, the way that, you know, Pearl Harbor was, or something, for your grandparents. And Kennedy assassination was for people in my generation, I suppose. And that, you know, those reference points matter and get people refer back to them, and, you know, they structure things and so on. Okay. Fourth, I am my others in the sense that we've already talked about, that we're mutually implicative. We allow each other, in a kind of Goffmanian way, we allow each other to be who we are. All right. So if you think of yourself as a you know, really kind, considerate, nice person, that's in part because other people have allowed you to do that and have taken it in taken your actions in that way, or that you're funny, or that you're a leader, or whatever. I think I may have told you when I went to college, there was a big change in my life, because I got along well in high school, you know, but I was just sort of part of the mass, as it were. I was just, you know, another guy at this boys' school. I went to college, and for whatever, I don't know what reason, I became kind of big man on campus. And I think I told you that I was physically larger than I had been in high school. I don't mean I changed. I mean the people around me got smaller. Did I tell you this? Yeah, that people, like all of the athletes were gone because the place didn't have any sports. And I made a decision not to swim in college, basically, because I said I'm never going to be, you know, a real top-notch person, so I don't want to do it. So anyway, so I went to school that didn't have any sports programs. All of a sudden, I was physically larger than a lot of people, and it changes the way you carry yourself and everything. It's astonishing. And next thing you know, I'm kind of this, you know, BMOC. By the way, that ended when I left college. But, you know, there you go. So you're surrounded by people in a context where you can be this person or this other person or whatnot. And your life is nothing but those different specific, you know, realities, so to speak, of what's been allowed. Anyhow, okay. Number 5. I am my others in the sense that I'm always acting in a tacit expectation of what other people will do. I've got some transportation examples here. That is, you get in a car and you start driving. Like I drive to work every day for, you know, 45 minutes or something. And every once in a while, this horrible thought comes through my head, like, why do I think this thing's going to hold together? It happens when you go, you know, you're driving along and there's there's a scraping noise in the back left wheel. Like, oh, shoot, maybe they didn't put the bolts on right. You know, the wheel's going to fall off and I'll die here on, you know, Route 20 or something. So you've got all this faith that totally unknown people have done a good job of building this really complicated, huge, heavy, super dangerous machine that's now going 60 miles an hour. That takes a lot of faith. Airplanes being the really easy example. Oh yeah, I'm getting in that. It'll fly. Why do you think that, right? Or I said before, you know, you get in a cab. You'll get in a car with unknown people and have them take you places. Who came up with this system? That just doesn't seem like an obviously good idea. And yet we do. We have all this faith. Or you'll walk into Commons and you'll eat sushi. okay, this is not automatically a good idea, right? But you do it, and it seems to work out pretty well. I mean, that's a lot of faith in those people who are, you know, standing back there behind the sushi bar or wherever else. Not to mention people all along the way. Or maybe I told you, you know, when I fell on the ice 3 years ago up in the Millbank lot, I went like this. We talked about this, right? Tell you about this? I got out of my car one morning. It was weather like this. Looked okay to me, so I didn't put on the yak tracks, you know, the little metal things that go on your shoes, which I now wear like they're my religion. Anyway, so I got out of the car and I started walking, and Paul Hagstrom in economics was right across the line. He said, "Oh, hi, Paul." And I go whoosh, like this. I levitated. I mean, wham. Okay? Up, straight down. Fell flat on my back. Awful, awful. And anyway, I'm not getting into all the details of this, but you know, it worked out okay, right? I still have to see a massage therapist basically weekly to keep my back working right, but that's fine. That's just muscle, you know. I don't care about that. It was bone and things of that sort that worried me. Anyway, what was the point of the story? Oh, I know. I'm lying there flat on my back, can't move, and they call, you know, EMTs. EMTs show up. Who's the EMT? Some cop. No, I didn't know her, as it turns out. Could have. It was some kid. You know, from my point of view, I don't know. There's a college student. I mean, I guess she's a college student. I'd never seen her. For all I know, she's going to walk down the street and go, "Oh, there's a guy. Huh. You okay? How do you feel? You know what date it is?" Right, maybe she's making this up. I don't know. But she seemed to know what she was doing. So I pick up the little cues for that and say, "Okay, I'll do whatever you say." And I'm thinking the stakes here are high, you understand? Like, you know, neck problems and background. I'm taking this seriously. But it's some person. So you have this faith that these people know what they're doing. And I said, like, "Okay, when y'all pick me up to put me in the ambulance, like, don't drop me." I said, people probably say that all the time. Do they say that all the time? Marie? No? They don't worry about it. Okay, good. Well, they were on the ice. Yeah. And I'm thinking, oh, great. You know? Oh, 1, 2. I'm like, y'all think about this first. Make sure you got a real, you know, good grip on the ground before you do. I'm telling you, it's slippery out here. But, you know, you're putting this tremendous faith in these other people whom you may not know at all. Right? Or they're wearing the right T-shirt or something. You know, okay, I'll put my life in your hands. See, you know, and usually it works out. You have this faith that other people will do your job, and you live that way. Again, it's just assumed, it's just taken for granted. We move around all day as if all these things are fine. All right, 6. I am my others in the sense that I'm social even when I'm alone. You know this. You trip, you stumble, you go, "Oh, you didn't." Right? You make a little comment, right? Or you laugh at yourself. How do you laugh at yourself? Isn't that goofy? Well, it's as if you step in outside and turn around and look back at yourself and laugh. All right? The for itself and the in itself, as Sartre talks about, right? That it's just a built-in fundamental part of who we are, that we can be detached from ourselves. Not only that we can be, that we have to be, and that we are all the time reflexive. Right? We're seeing ourselves as other people would see us in some respects. Now, you're social even when alone. There are some other sort of more serious versions of this. I had a friend in graduate school, very good friend, named Barry, who was he was a religion student, and he was also in sociology. Barry was an atheist. I mean, he was a serious, hardcore, proud of it atheist. Had lots of great arguments about this. He could tell you up one side, down the other, why there's no such thing as God. That's this total illusion. It's a fraud, you know, it's been perpetrated. He studied religion, you understand? Well, that's fine. But, you know, he was just like, you know, this is ridiculous. It's caused all kind of damage and so on and so on. Except, one day, Barry realized that, in fact, he wasn't an atheist. By which I mean, he meant, no matter how many arguments he had in his head about it, no matter how irrational or stupid he thought it was, he lived as if there were a God. He was actually living as if God existed. That is, he believed in final justice. He believed that there were transcendent rights and wrong. There were things that were right or wrong. There was a sense of coherence and meaning to the world and to life. That is to say, for all of his, he would say, cheap talk about being an atheist, and that he couldn't figure it out, right? This notion of God. Everything in his day-to-day life spoke to a belief in God. Now again, it wasn't a belief like in his mind, because he didn't. But in his life, there it was. Right? There it was. Yeah. The same way you can, somebody doesn't have to tell you they love you if they're doing all those things. It's just there. That's what they do. That's what it's a live thing. Okay, so there's Barry and God. He realized that he had been, I think the way he put it, I wrote here, is he had been living in the presence of God, no matter how much he denied it intellectually. He'd just been doing it. He'd just been doing it all along. It's like, oh my God, I'm not an atheist. Okay, so let's. There's a note here. I put note at the top of the next page. Okay, this is a basic sort of philosophical point. One of the lessons of existential phenomenology as a philosophical movement has been to say that you don't need to prove the existence of other people, or the existence of God for that matter. Philosophers spent hundreds of years trying to figure out things like, what if this is all just an illusion? Right? Maybe you've done this when you were a little kid, right? Maybe it's all just a movie. Like this is the Truman Show or something, or I'm just making this all up in my head. And you people are all just imaginary creatures. How do we know that other people exist? And philosophers call this the problem of skepticism, right? How can you prove the existence of other people? Well, the phenomenologists looked at this for a while, and they go, you don't have to. You're already doing it. The fact is, whatever you think about rationally, you're already living like there are other people. QED. End of problem. Right? Oh, and now we can have a little discussion about it for academic sake. So many years ago, Bertrand Russell, who was a famous philosopher who wrote a lot of stuff read by the wider public, he got a long letter once from a lady who was very serious about philosophy, about study. She wanted to learn about philosophy. She said, "I'm a skeptic." She said, I've thought it over and worked through all the other people don't exist. Right? I figured this out that you cannot. It's just ridiculous. You cannot prove that other people are out there at all. So Russell read her letter and didn't answer. That's it. Right? Huh? What are you going to do? She's not going to believe I'm here anyway. What's the point of writing back? And the point of the story is, obviously she did believe in other people. She wrote him a letter. Right? Okay. Number 3 here on our outline. So there are all these ways in which I am my others, and the point of that little interlude there was just that right from the outset, our lives declare that we believe in other people, and there's no need to prove it. Merleau-Ponty gets into this in the second of the 2 little readings that I gave you today. Okay. So, Roman numeral 3 here is the failure or denial of sociality. That is, lots of times people act as if they aren't really connected to other people in all sorts of ways. And that's a lot of what our bad faith discussions are about and so on. Or you pretend not to be involved, or pretend that non-involvement with others is somehow possible. You know, I'm just here on my own, don't bother me, that's not my problem, all that kind of stuff. Anytime you say that's not my problem, you've decided that that's not your problem, right? Which is to say you have a way of, that's your response to the problem, okay? There are other funny sort of cases of people not being aware of how tied up we are with other people. My enjoyable one, I thought, last fall was Mitt Romney's comment. He said that, I won't get the quote exactly right, but he said, Ann and I didn't inherit anything, okay? And he went on to explain, he said what that means. He says, when my parents died, when my father died, yeah, he left us a lot of money. So Mitt Romney's dad was the CEO of American Motors, which was a huge car company back in the 40s, 50s, 60s. And, I mean, they were very wealthy people. Okay, so he inherited a bundle, but by the time George Romney died, Mitt was already well established in business and had made his own fortune, right? So when they inherited the money, they gave it all away. They gave a lot of it to the Mormon church, and they gave, charities and things like that, right? And so he said, we didn't inherit anything. Which kind of leaves out the fact that he was born the son of, the CEO of American Motors, who was the governor of Michigan, who was a very close call candidate for president of the United States, his father was. He grew up in a very wealthy family. He went to Cranbrook School, and he went to very elite schools all the way through. He went to Brigham Young, he went to Harvard, got an MBA, got all this stuff. Had no student loans because parents paid for all of it, right? Worked, went into business, made a fortune, et cetera, right? But it was as if, because he didn't get that last chunk, somehow everything up until then didn't count as an inheritance. And it was just, I don't care about Mitt Romney. I mean, the story's not about him, really. It's just about all the stuff that you get from other people that you don't even think of as stuff you got from other people, like your parents brought you up in a nice home, They fed you every day. You had clothes. Oh, what do you know? And to say, I didn't inherit anything is like, geez, wow, boy, that's clueless is what that is. I mean, it's like, it's all about me and just kind of by myself. This is a funny case. I was like, are you seriously saying that? Anyhow, okay, let's go on. Don't worry about the bad faith stuff. You know about that already. Okay. So there's another way of denying our connectedness to other people, our sociality, you might say, which would be various versions of bad faith. And this is what the Anti-Semite Jew book is about. And this is seeing the other person not as a person you're in a relationship with, so to speak, but seeing the other person as an object, treating him as a thing. Okay, and Kant talks about this kind of problem. Treating the other person as just an object in the world to be used for your own benefit. Martin Buber has great stuff, if you ever read I and Thou, about, he says there are two kinds of worlds. It's kind of reductive, but it works. There's I-thou relationships, and there's I-it relationships. He has others, but the I-it relationship is where you see other people as objects for your use. I-thou is when you actually try to connect to the other person as a real human being with all sorts of complexities and things of that sort. Now you see minor versions of this, dinner conversations that aren't actually conversations, but are serial monologues. One person talks for a while, and then the next person talks for a while, and the next person talks for a while. And it's not really going anywhere, and they're not responding to each other. It's just kind of turn-taking through, I did this and this and this, and oh, and I did this and this and this, and I did that and that and that. Oh, okay. That's kind of like a bunch of disconnected objects just giving off their own stories, but not really not really connecting. Different example of this kind of I-it thing. I had an uncle who, nice guy, passed away recently. He was 99 years and 10 months old. I'm sure it killed him, actually, so to speak. Is not getting there, because this guy wanted to be 100. I mean, he was in great shape. I had seen him like 6 months before. He went to the office every day. Okay, he'd get up, put on a coat and tie, and go down to this law office every day. And my mom said, "Oh, he didn't do any real work." I'm like, "Oh yeah, what a slacker." I mean, Mom, cut the guy a break. You know, he's showing up. Nobody else his age is. Anyway, he'd go to work every day. He'd go swimming every day at lunchtime. Anyway, so the point, that's not the point at all. But he died at 99. God bless him. I was going to go to his party. I've never known somebody who was 100. I mean, I've met people, but that, you know, I've never known somebody. Anyhow, my uncle used to, when he was younger, used to go around the world regularly, like every year or every 2 years or something. They'd take this big splash. He had money, right? Travel around the world fairly often. I mean, around, you know, go also. And he'd come back with slides. You ever see slideshows? Back in the days of slide photography? And, you know, they set up a screen and show you their slides. Here we are at the temple of wherever in Thailand or something. Lots of these things. Well, what was interesting about this was my uncle went around the world many times and saw all these things, met all these people. And as far as I can tell, none of it ever affected him at all. It was a travelogue. You know, he was looking at pictures. And he was taking pictures, which he had, like I say, in abundance. But none of it had ever changed his opinions about anything. Or he hadn't said, you know, I saw this thing in India, and boy, it really, you know, I had to rethink such. He never said that. He never rethought squat. And the guy was writing opinion pieces in the local paper till he died. And as far as I could tell, he was locked in at about 1937, which is about when he finished college. Actually, my uncle, not him, his younger brother went to Hamilton, graduated class 38. So he'd never been affected by anything he'd seen. It had all been just kind of out there. And you know, there are a lot of people who do that. They have experience. They go places. They're having experiences in order to add them up. But it doesn't affect who they are. Right? So it's all kind of out there. Now, there are other cases of this kind of thing where you realize the gap between you and, let's see how to explain this. I'll give you the example and see if it makes sense. I was in graduate school, and I met this woman, this nurse, and I was smitten. And I remember sitting in a pizza restaurant with my friend John, who I still connect with on Facebook. And I said to him, John, I have a problem. He says, what's the problem? I said, how can I win the love of a beautiful woman? And he said, he was a wise fellow. He said, that's not the problem. He said, the problem is, what are you going to do with it when you do? I was like, oh, shit. I hadn't thought about that. You know, I hadn't gotten that far in the process. Anyway, so there I was. I'm smitten, this woman, right? So what do you know? We fell in love, right? I mean, like, it was mutual. It was great. Except the problem was, I realized, you know, then I think I realized it probably talking with him. I'm like, oh. But I'm no longer in love with a beautiful woman. I'm in love with her, with this person. And yeah, she happens to be beautiful, right? But I no longer saw her as a beautiful woman because the whole point of that, you know, that shtick is sort of, you know, oh, there's this object that I possess, right? But you know, once you, so to speak, possess that object, it's not an object anymore. There's a human being you're dealing with, and she's real. And so I sort of didn't see her any. I mean, I thought she was beautiful in a sense, but I wasn't. You know, it wasn't like I trotted her around like a trophy wife, right? Because that's not what love is. And so, I know there was some point to this more. But I can't remember what it was. Yeah. And, oh, I know. And afterward, you know, I look back on it now, and I look at, this is true now, I look at, every so often I can look at a picture of her now, say, and, you know, it's been so long, I sort of realize, no one else would say she was beautiful. Right? So from the outset, in a sense, from the outset, I was in love with her. Right? And so then I'm like, how do I win the love of a beautiful woman? Oh, I passed that already. Right? Right? Because that's who she was to me, etc. I think you get the idea. Anyway, but a counter to that, a counter example is there was a very famous actress in the 40s, Rita Hayworth, who was glamorous and movie star and fabulous and, you know, sex goddess on the screen, this kind of thing. And she made a movie called Gilda that was a real big hit and steamy and all that stuff. Steamy by the standards of the day. And she, Rita Hayworth had an active love life. But she said once to a biographer, she said, you know, she said, it's terrible. My love life has been awful. And she was a very unhappy life. She said, it's awful. She said, these men, I meet these men, and, you know, we get together, and she said, they go to bed with Gilda, and they wake up with me. Right? Which is a pretty elegant way of putting it. Right? They go to bed with Gilda, and they wake up with me. And that's not what they wanted, you know. And so so she had this, like I say, she had this unhappy life. At any rate. Okay, but that's not to say that what we might call recognition of other people isn't possible. So we objectify people in a lot of ways and typify, and we've talked all about that before, typification and using other people as, you know, and seeing them in roles and all of that, right? But it is possible to recognize other people. And again, Martin Buber is the place to go for this if you're interested in this kind of topic, and he tries to describe what that means. And it's not the same as getting to know somebody well, like, you know, having all the facts about their life or anything. It can happen, you know, you're riding on the subway and you talk to somebody next to you, and for whatever reason you just understand who they are, or recognize what they really are. And it's not, Sartre has a great essay on, I think it's called Faces and Official Portraits. And he talks about the genre of official portraits, that like they do for presidents and stuff. You can go in, I don't know, yeah, maybe they don't let you into Bristol and the campus, Bristol Campus Center, as it's called, although it should be Campus Periphery. But the building down there, on the second floor there's Dwight Lounge, and they have these official portraits of presidents of Hamilton College. Okay, so Sartre wrote this essay about official portraits and what they try to convey. And if you look, you don't have a $100 bill on you, I suppose, but if you look at a Franklin $100 bill, there's a picture, you know, of Ben Franklin. And I sort of try to summarize. He looks like the very image of benign wisdom. And Lincoln, somber resolve. And Washington looks dead. On a $1 bill, he's frozen. You know, and I think, what is that? That's monumental, right? Like a statue kind of thing. Monumental fatherdom of country was kind of what, you know, maybe the guy was trying to picture when he did that portrait. Or, I don't know, they still do Hamilton yearbooks?
Yep.
A yep. That was an interesting way to say it.
Well, it's just funny because I don't think anyone looks at them really, and then
Okay.
they make us, well, they don't make you, but you're supposed to take your senior portrait.
Oh, that was in the Spectator just last week, right? Something about senior portrait? No.
They have.
They did? A couple of weeks ago?
It was like 2 weeks
Oh,
ago or
okay.
something.
Oh, okay. Okay. But you notice how much was conveyed by the yep. Right? Wow, there's a lot of meaning in a very short space. Yeah, but senior portraits or yearbook photos. Yearbook photos are always this kind of exuberant, jovial bonhomie is the word that always comes to mind for me. It's like people are at parties and they got their arms around each other, you know, or they're doing one of these, or they're drinking. You know, they're always drinking. But you know, it's kind of like, Somehow that strikes me as the usual thing. But people, you look at these pictures, I mean, people really get along. You know, there's just no problem here. And God, they're the best of friends, just the best of friends, projected in that portrait. And you can try to make yourself that kind of person, and people do, and we do, right? When somebody comes around with a camera, you put on a face for it. Say, oh, wait a minute, and you do whatever you do. Well, think about that. Who are you trying to be or project in those portraits? So there's no real conclusion to all this. I'm just trying to give you a sense of how tied up we are with other people all the time, and how any effort to stop that is kind of, it's probably some kind of bad faith. It's trying to be something locked in that you can't lock in, and we want to do that for all kind of good reasons, but there's a kind of self-deception involved in that. Okay, so read Anti-Semite Jew for tomorrow night, and I'll see you then. It's a good, serious book. Yeah.